The sound of hooves thundering away left only silence and dust. And Olivia Nelson lay crumpled in the dirt outside the saloon, blood seeping from the gash above her temple, and her ribs screaming with every shallow breath she managed to take. She had tried to defend herself when those three drifters cornered her in the alley, had fought tooth and nail when they grabbed at her reticule, and then at her body when she resisted. But there were too many of them, and they were too strong. The year was 1875, and independence. Missouri was supposed to be civilized by now, a proper town with law and order. But it seemed civilization only extended so far when the sun went down, and the decent folk retreated behind locked doors. Her vision swam as she tried to push herself up, her arms trembling with the effort. But the pain was too much and she collapsed back down, tasting copper and dirt. Heavy footsteps approached, and fear shot through her battered body. She tried to scramble away, tried to make herself smaller, but she could barely move. A shadow fell over her, blocking out the harsh afternoon sun that had broken through the clouds, and she squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for another blow. Instead, she felt strong hands sliding beneath her shoulders and knees, lifting her with surprising gentleness. "Easy now," a deep voice said, rough with emotion. "I have got you. You are safe." Olivia forced her eyes open and found herself staring up at a face she had never seen before. He was a cowboy. That much was clear from his worn leather vest and the wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his angular features. His eyes were a striking gray blue, like storm clouds over the plains, and they were filled with a fury that made her flinch despite the gentleness of his hold. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry, her lips split and swollen. She managed to lift one shaking hand and point down the street where the drifters had ridden off. The cowboy's jaw clenched, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He turned his head and called out, "Doc Patterson, I need you now." Then he looked back down at her, and his expression softened. "My name is Andrew Newman. I am taking you somewhere safe, and I promise you this on my life and my honor nobody touches you again." The words washed over her like a benediction, and despite everything, despite the pain and the fear and the humiliation, Olivia felt something loosen in her chest. She nodded weakly, and then the world went gray at the edges. When she woke, she was lying on a soft bed in a room she did not recognize. Afternoon light filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on whitewashed walls. Her head throbbed, and when she tried to sit up, a gentle hand pressed her back down. "Do not try to move just yet," a woman's voice said. Olivia turned her head carefully and saw a plump woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. "I am Martha Patterson. My husband is the doctor. That young man who brought you in has been pacing a hole in my parlor floor waiting for you to wake up." "How long?" Olivia managed to croak. "Just a few hours. Samuel stitched up the cut on your head and wrapped your ribs. 3 of them are cracked, he says, but they will heal if you rest proper. You have got bruises everywhere, dear, and some scrapes that needed cleaning, but nothing that will not mend." Martha's eyes were soft with sympathy. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Olivia closed her eyes, the memories rushing back. 3 men. I was walking back from the general store. They followed me into the alley beside the saloon. They wanted my money at first, but then they wanted more. Her voice broke. I fought them. I fought as hard as I could, but they were too strong. They hit me, and when I fell, they kicked me, and then they just left me there. Martha's face hardened. Did they? She hesitated, clearly struggling with how to ask. No, Olivia said quickly, understanding. They did not get that far. Someone must have heard the commotion, or maybe they just got scared. They ran before they could do worse than they already did. Relief flooded Martha's features. Thank the Lord for small mercies. Now let me fetch Andrew. He has been beside himself with worry." Before Olivia could protest, Martha was out the door. She heard low voices in the hallway, and then the cowboy from before appeared in the doorway, his hat in his hands. Up close and in better light, Olivia could see he was probably in his mid-20s, just a handful of years older than her own 22. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and there was a scar along his jawline that spoke of a hard life. But his eyes were what held her attention, those storm-gray eyes that looked at her with such intensity she felt it like a physical touch. "Miss," he said, his voice rough. "I am glad to see you awake. How are you feeling?" "Like I was trampled by a horse," Olivia admitted, trying for a weak smile. "But I am alive, thanks to you." "Martha said your name is Andrew Newman," he nodded, stepping further into the room but keeping a respectful distance. "Yes, madam. I work at the Double R Ranch about 5 miles outside town. I was in Independence picking up supplies when I heard the commotion in the alley. By the time I got there, those cowards were riding off and you were lying in the dirt." His hands clenched around the brim of his hat. "I should have been faster. I should have caught them." "You saved my life," Olivia said firmly. "If you had not found me, I might have bled to death in that alley, or worse, those men might have come back. You have nothing to apologize for." Andrew's expression remained troubled. "I sent word to Sheriff Morrison about what happened. He is out trying to track down those men now. Did you get a good look at them? Could you identify them if you saw them again?" Olivia shuddered but forced herself to think back. One was tall and thin, with a scar across his nose. Another was shorter and stocky, with a red beard. The third was mean-looking, with dark hair and a tattoo on his neck. I think it was a snake. They were dressed like drifters, worn clothes and dusty boots. I had never seen them before. Andrew's eyes narrowed. "I might know who they are. There have been 3 men matching that description causing trouble at some of the ranches north of here. Stealing supplies, harassing the women, that sort of thing. Nobody has been able to catch them yet because they keep moving." "Well, they made a mistake staying in Independence long enough to be seen," Martha said from the doorway, carrying a tray with tea and broth. "The sheriff will find them, mark my words. This town does not take kindly to men who hurt women." Olivia wanted to believe that, but she had lived in Independence for 3 years now, ever since she came west after her parents died back in Ohio, and she knew the reality was more complicated. Justice was not always swift or certain, especially when it came to drifters who could disappear into the vast prairie with barely a trace. But she kept those thoughts to herself and accepted the cup of broth Martha offered her, sipping it slowly despite the way her split lip stung. Andrew watched her for a moment longer, then seemed to come to a decision. "Miss Nelson, it is Nelson, is it not? I heard someone in town mention your name. I know we have only just met, but I want you to know that I meant what I said back there. Nobody is going to hurt you again, not while I am around. I intend to make sure of that." Something in his tone made Olivia's heart skip. "That is very kind of you, Mr. Newman, but I cannot ask you to." "You are not asking," Andrew interrupted gently. "I am offering. More than that, I am insisting. Those men are still out there, and until the sheriff catches them, you are not safe alone. Where do you live? Do you have family here?" "I have a small house on the east side of town, near the schoolhouse," Olivia said. "I am a seamstress. I work from home and take in mending and make dresses for the women in town. And no, I have no family here. No family anywhere, actually. My parents died 4 years ago and I had no siblings." Andrew's expression softened with understanding. "Then you are alone." "I am accustomed to it," Olivia said, lifting her chin despite the pain it caused. "I have been taking care of myself for a long time now." "I do not doubt that," Andrew said, But there is a difference between being capable and being safe. Please let me help you. At least until those men are caught. Olivia wanted to refuse. She had been on her own for so long, had learned to rely on herself and no one else, and accepting help from a stranger felt dangerous in a different way than the violence she had just endured. But she was also practical, and she knew that Andrew was right. Those men could come back. They might target her specifically, especially if they thought she could identify them, and she was in no condition to defend herself right now. "All right," she said quietly. "But just until the sheriff finds them." Relief crossed Andrew's face. "Thank you. I will make arrangements with Mrs. Patterson to stay here tonight while you recover. Tomorrow, if Doc Patterson says you are well enough to move, I will take you home and make sure your house is secure. And I will check on you every day until this is resolved." "You have your own work to do," Olivia protested. "I cannot ask you to neglect your responsibilities at the ranch." "My boss is a good man," Andrew said. "When I explain the situation, he will understand. And if he does not, well, there are other ranches looking for experienced hands." He smiled then, a crooked thing that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. "Besides, I have been working on the Double R for 3 years now. I have earned some consideration." Martha shooed Andrew out after that, insisting that Olivia needed rest, but not before making him promise to come back the next morning. As soon as he was gone, Martha gave Olivia a knowing look. "That is a good man," she said, adjusting the pillows behind Olivia's back. "Not many would go to such trouble for a stranger." "He seems very kind," Olivia agreed carefully. Martha chuckled. "Kind and handsome too, if you do not mind my saying. My Samuel was like that when we first met, all protective and determined. We have been married 32 years now, and he still looks at me the way Andrew was looking at you." Heat flooded Olivia's bruised face. "Mrs. Patterson, I hardly think we just met, and under terrible circumstances. He is just being a gentleman." Martha said, her eyes twinkling. "You keep telling yourself that, dear. Now drink your tea and get some rest. Tomorrow we'll be here before you know it." Olivia did as she was told, but sleep was a long time coming. Her body ached, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw those men's faces, felt their hands grabbing at her. But underneath the fear and the pain was something else, something warm and confusing. She kept thinking about the way Andrew had looked at her, the fierce protectiveness in his voice when he promised that nobody would touch her again. She had been alone for so long, had convinced herself that she was fine that way, that she did not need anyone. But the feeling of being held in Andrew's arms, of being carried to safety, of knowing that someone cared whether she lived or died, it had awakened something in her that she had thought was long buried. She told herself it was just the circumstances, that anyone would feel grateful and emotional after what she had been through. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. There had been something in Andrew's eyes, something that called to a matching feeling in her own heart, and no amount of logic or practicality could make that go away. The next morning, Dr. Patterson examined her thoroughly and declared that while she was still in considerable pain, there was no reason she could not go home as long as she rested and did not overexert herself. Andrew arrived just as the doctor was finishing his instructions, and Olivia noticed that he had cleaned up since yesterday. His hair was neatly combed, and he was wearing a clean shirt under his vest. He was also carrying a bundle of wildflowers, which he presented to her with an awkward sort of formality that she found endearing. "I thought you might like something cheerful to look at," he said, his ears turning slightly red. "They are beautiful," Olivia said, genuinely touched. "Thank you." Andrew had brought a wagon, and he lifted Olivia into it with the same careful gentleness he had shown the day before. The ride to her house was short, and he kept up a steady stream of conversation, clearly trying to distract her from the jolting of the wagon over the rutted streets. He told her about the Double R Ranch, about the horses they raised and the cattle they ran. He told her about growing up in Kansas, about losing his own family to cholera when he was 16 and making his way west to start over. There was a kinship in their shared losses, and Olivia found herself opening up more than she had with anyone in years. When they reached her small house, Andrew insisted on checking every room and every window before he would let her settle in. He found that the back door lock was loose, and he disappeared for an hour, returning with tools and a new lock that he installed himself. Then he checked the front door, the windows, and even looked around the perimeter of the property. "You have got good sight lines," he said when he came back inside. "You can see anyone approaching from any direction, but I am still going to come by twice a day to check on you, morning and evening, if that is all right with you." "You really do not have to do all this," Olivia said, though her protest was half-hearted. The truth was, she felt safer with Andrew around, and the thought of him checking on her regularly was more comforting than she wanted to admit. "I know I do not have to," Andrew said, looking at her directly. "I want to. Please, just let me do this." So Olivia agreed, and Andrew became a regular fixture in her life. He came every morning before heading to the ranch and every evening after work. At first, the visits were brief, just long enough to make sure she was safe and had everything she needed. But as the days passed and Olivia healed, the visits grew longer. Andrew would help her with tasks that were too difficult with her cracked ribs, carrying water or moving heavy bolts of fabric. And then he would stay for coffee, and they would talk. Olivia learned that Andrew was thoughtful and intelligent, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh despite herself. He loved horses with a passion that was almost poetic, and he could talk for hours about bloodlines and training techniques. He was ambitious too, saving every penny he could with the dream of buying his own land someday, his own ranch where he could raise the finest horses in Missouri. Andrew learned that Olivia had a sharp mind and a sharper tongue when provoked, that she loved to read and had a collection of books that was impressive for a seamstress in a frontier town. She was talented with a needle, her stitches so fine, and even that the wealthy women in town competed for her services. She was also stubborn and independent to a fault, which both frustrated and charmed him. A week after the attack, Sheriff Morrison came by to give Olivia an update. He had tracked the 3 drifters to a camp north of town and arrested them with the help of a deputy and several armed townsmen. All 3 were now in jail awaiting trial, and the sheriff was confident they would be convicted and sent to prison for a long time. "You will have to testify at the trial," Sheriff Morrison said apologetically. "I know it will not be easy, but your testimony is important." "I will do whatever is necessary," Olivia said firmly, and Andrew, who was there for his evening visit, squeezed her hand in support. The trial took place 2 weeks later, and it was every bit as difficult as Olivia had feared. She had to recount what happened in front of a courtroom full of people, had to look at those 3 men and point them out as her attackers. They glared at her with undisguised hatred, and one of them made a crude gesture that had the judge threatening to have him gagged. But Andrew sat in the front row the entire time, his steady presence giving her strength, and when she finally stepped down from the witness stand, he was there to catch her when her legs threatened to give out. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before finding all 3 men guilty. They were sentenced to 10 years each in the state penitentiary, and as they were led out of the courtroom in chains, Andrew pulled Olivia close and whispered, "It is over. You are safe now. But the thing was, Olivia had felt safe for weeks now. Not because the men who hurt her were locked up, but because Andrew had kept his promise. He had been there every single day, had protected her and cared for her, and made her feel like she mattered. And somewhere along the way, gratitude had transformed into something deeper, something that made her heart race when she heard his footsteps on her porch, something that made her count the hours until she would see him again. She was in love with Andrew Newman, and she had no idea what to do about it. The problem was, she did not know if he felt the same way. He was devoted and protective, but was that love or just his natural sense of honor? He stayed and talked with her for hours, but maybe he was just being kind. He brought her flowers and fixed things around her house and made sure she ate properly, but maybe that was just what a good man did for someone he considered a friend. Olivia agonized over it for days, going back and forth, trying to read meaning into every word and gesture. Finally, Martha Patterson, who had become a good friend, took pity on her. "For heaven's sake, child," Martha said when Olivia went to her for advice. "That man is head over heels in love with you. Anyone with eyes can see it." "But he has never said anything," Olivia protested. "He has never even tried to, I mean. He is always perfectly respectful." "Of course he is," Martha said. "He is a gentleman, and you have been through a trauma. He is probably terrified of pushing too hard or too fast and scaring you away." Men can be remarkably dense about these things for all their good qualities. "So what do I do?" Olivia asked. Martha smiled. "You tell him how you feel, dear. Life is too short and too uncertain to waste time on false modesty. If you love him, tell him." It sounded so simple when Martha said it, but Olivia's heart was pounding when Andrew showed up that evening. He had brought supplies from town, thread she needed for a dress she was making, and coffee because she had mentioned she was running low. Such small, thoughtful gestures, and they made her love him all the more. "Andrew," she said as he was getting ready to leave, "could you stay a little longer? There is something I want to talk to you about." Concern immediately creased his brow. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Yes," Olivia said quickly. "Everything is fine. Better than fine, actually. I just need to say something, and I need you to let me get through it without interrupting, because if I stop, I might lose my nerve." Andrew nodded slowly and sat back down at her kitchen table, his full attention on her. Olivia took a deep breath. "When you found me in that alley, I was certain I was going to die. And even if I survived, I thought I would never feel safe again, never trust anyone again. But then you promised me that nobody would touch me again, and you kept that promise. You have been there every single day, taking care of me, protecting me, and somewhere along the way, you became the most important person in my life." Her voice shook, but she pushed on. "I am in love with you, Andrew. I know we have only known each other for a few weeks, and I know this is probably too fast and maybe you do not feel the same way, but I needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you, because you have been nothing but honest and good to me, and you deserve the truth." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Andrew was staring at her with an expression she could not read, and Olivia felt her heart sinking. She had made a terrible mistake. She had misread everything, and now she had made things awkward and ruined the friendship they had built. But then Andrew was moving, pushing back from the table and crossing to where she stood in 2 long strides. He cupped her face in his hands, so gentle, always so gentle, and looked into her eyes with an intensity that stole her breath. "Olivia," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I have been in love with you since the moment I lifted you out of that dirt. I know how that sounds, I know it is crazy to fall in love that fast, but I looked at you, hurt and scared but still fighting, and something just clicked into place inside me. I have been trying to give you space, trying not to push because you have been through so much, but there has not been a single day when I have not wanted to tell you how I feel. I love you. I am completely and utterly in love with you, and if you will have me, I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that." Relief and joy flooded through Olivia in equal measure. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will have you. I want that too." Andrew smiled, that crooked smile that made her heart skip, and then he was kissing her. It was soft and sweet and careful, mindful of her still healing lip, but it was also full of promise. Olivia melted into him, wrapping her arms around his neck, and for the first time since the attack, she felt completely whole. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Andrew rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, take you to church socials and dances, let everyone in town see that you are mine and I am yours. And then, when enough time has passed that you are sure, I want to marry you. I want to build that ranch I have been dreaming about, and I want you there beside me." "Is that something you could want too?" "Yes," Olivia said without hesitation. "All of it, yes." So Andrew courted her, and it was everything Olivia had never known she wanted. He took her on picnics by the river and held her hand during church services. He taught her to ride horses, patient and encouraging when she was nervous, and she taught him to dance, laughing at his initial clumsiness. They talked about everything, their pasts, their dreams, their fears. They argued sometimes, both being stubborn people, but they always worked through it, learning to compromise and communicate. The people of Independence watched with approval as the cowboy who had saved the seamstress and the woman he had fallen in love with became an inseparable pair. There was something romantic about their story, something that gave hope to others that good things could come from terrible circumstances. 6 months after that first kiss, Andrew proposed properly. He took Olivia out to a piece of land he had been looking at, a beautiful stretch of prairie with a stream running through it and a view of the distant hills. He had been saving for years, and he finally had enough for a down payment. "This is where I want to build our ranch," he said, pulling her close. "This is where I want to build our life. Olivia Nelson, will you marry me?" Olivia said yes with tears streaming down her face, and Andrew slipped a simple gold band on her finger that had belonged to his mother. They were married 3 months later in a ceremony at the Independence Church. Martha Patterson cried happy tears and declared it the most beautiful wedding she had ever seen. Olivia wore a dress she had made herself, white silk with lace trim, and she had never felt more beautiful than when she saw the look in Andrew's eyes as she walked down the aisle. The early years of their marriage were hard work, but filled with joy. Andrew continued working at the Double R Ranch to bring in steady money while they slowly built their own place. Olivia took in sewing work from home, saving every penny. On weekends and evenings, they worked together on their land, building a house and a barn, putting up fences, starting a small herd. Andrew was everything Olivia had hoped for and more. He was a loving husband, attentive and affectionate, and he never once made her feel less than his equal partner in their endeavors. When she had nightmares about the attack, which still happened occasionally, he held her and reminded her that she was safe. When she doubted herself or her abilities, he was there with encouragement and faith in her. Olivia, in turn, made their house a home. She cooked meals that Andrew declared were better than anything he had ever tasted. She mended his clothes and made curtains for their windows and planted a garden that flourished under her care. She learned to help with the horses, discovering that she had a natural touch with the nervous ones, able to calm them with soft words and patient handling. 2 years into their marriage, Olivia discovered she was expecting their first child. Andrew was over the moon with excitement and also terrified. He became even more protective than before, not wanting her to lift anything heavy or overexert herself. Olivia found it both endearing and exasperating, but she could not really complain when it came from such a place of love. Their daughter was born on a snowy January morning in 1878, with Martha Patterson serving as midwife. She had Andrew's dark hair and Olivia's green eyes, and they named her Emma Grace Newman. Andrew cried when he held her for the first time, this big, strong cowboy reduced to tears by the tiny bundle in his arms. "She is perfect," he whispered. "You are both perfect." Emma was a happy baby who grew into a curious toddler, trailing after her father whenever he was home and watching her mother sew with fascinated eyes. The ranch prospered as Andrew's reputation as a horseman grew. People came from all over Missouri to buy horses trained by Andrew Newman, horses that were steady and smart and responsive. The money allowed them to expand, to build a bigger barn and buy more breeding stock. Olivia's sewing business continued to thrive as well, and she trained several young women in town in the fine art of needlework, taking pride in passing on her skills. She was known for her fair dealing and her kind heart, always willing to extend credit to those who were struggling or to take on a rush order for a wedding or funeral. When Emma was 3, Olivia became pregnant again. This time, she was less nervous and more excited, knowing what to expect. Their son was born in the spring of 1881. A robust baby with Andrew's gray-blue eyes and a loud cry that suggested he would not be ignored. They named him Oliver Andrew Newman, and Emma was delighted to have a baby brother to help take care of. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch grew and flourished. Emma started school and proved to be as bright as she was sweet-natured. Oliver was a handful, always getting into mischief, but he had a good heart. Andrew hired on a couple of ranch hands to help with the work, and Olivia took on an apprentice seamstress, a young woman named Clara who showed real talent. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Andrew took Olivia back to the spot where he had proposed. The land had been transformed where there had once been empty prairie. There was now a thriving ranch with a big house, a barn, corrals, and horses grazing peacefully. They stood together, his arm around her waist, looking at everything they had built. "You ever think about that day?" Andrew asked quietly. "The day we met, sometimes," Olivia admitted. "It was the worst day of my life and the best day of my life all mixed together. I hate what those men did to me, but if it had not happened, I might never have met you." Andrew tightened his hold on her. "I used to feel guilty about that, about being grateful for something that hurt you so badly. But then, I realized that the important thing is not how we met, but what we did with the chance we were given. We built something good and real and lasting. We made a family and a life together. That is what matters." "You kept your promise," Olivia said, turning to look up at him. "You said nobody would touch me again, and they have not. But more than that, you taught me that I could trust again, that I could love again. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have." Andrew kissed her then, and it was just as sweet as their first kiss all those years ago. "I love you," he said. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Olivia said. "Always." They walked back to the house hand in hand where their children were waiting. Emma was helping Clara set the table for the anniversary dinner they had planned, and Oliver was supposed to be helping, but was mostly getting in the way. It was chaotic and noisy and absolutely perfect. Over dinner, surrounded by family and friends, Olivia looked around the table and felt a profound sense of gratitude. She thought about the young woman she had been, lying bleeding in the dirt, certain her life was over. She thought about the cowboy who had lifted her up and made a promise he had more than kept. And she thought about all the years in between, the struggles and the triumphs, the sorrows and the joys. Life had not been easy. They had faced hardships, droughts that threatened the ranch, illnesses that scared them, disagreements that tested their bond. But they had faced everything together, and their love had only grown stronger with time. Andrew was still her rock, still the man who made her feel safe and cherished. And she was still the woman who had captured his heart in a moment of crisis and never let go. As the evening wore on and the children were put to bed, Olivia and Andrew sat on the porch of their house, watching the stars come out. The night was warm and the sound of horses moving in the corrals was peaceful and familiar. "What are you thinking about?" Andrew asked, pulling her closer. "Everything," Olivia said. "How far we have come, how much we have built together, how lucky I am to have you." "I am the lucky one," Andrew said. "You took a chance on a cowboy with nothing but a dream and a promise. You believed in me when I was not sure I believed in myself." "We believed in each other," Olivia corrected. "That is what made all the difference." The years continued to pass, marked by the steady progression of seasons and the growth of their children. Emma grew into a beautiful young woman with her mother's grace and her father's work ethic. She inherited Olivia's talent for sewing and Andrew's way with horses, and she became indispensable to the running of both the ranch and her mother's sewing business. Oliver was more of a handful, always pushing boundaries and testing limits, but he had a natural gift for working with the cattle and proved himself to be a capable rancher despite his youth. In 1889, when Emma was 11 and Oliver was 8, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. It was a surprise. She had thought her childbearing years were behind her, but a welcome one. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, and there were complications that worried both Andrew and Dr. Patterson. But Olivia was determined and strong, and in the early hours of a March morning she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The boy was named Adam Nathan Newman, and the girl was named Opal Marie Newman. They were tiny but healthy, and Emma and Oliver were beside themselves with excitement at having not one but two new siblings to dote on. Andrew, for his part, walked around in a daze for days, unable to quite believe that he was now the father of 5 children. "Our family just keeps growing," he said one night, watching Olivia nurse the twins with a look of wonder on his face. "I never imagined I would be this blessed." "Neither did I," Olivia said softly. "When I think about where I started, alone and afraid, and where I am now, it feels like a miracle." "You are the miracle," Andrew said. "You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and refused to let it define you. You built a life and a family, and you did it with courage and grace. I am in awe of you, Olivia. I have been since the day I met you." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. Even after 14 years of marriage, Andrew still had the power to move her with his words. "I could not have done any of it without you," she said. "You were my foundation, my safe place. You still are." The twins thrived and the ranch continued to prosper. Andrew's horses were now famous throughout the region, and he had buyers coming from as far as Kansas City and St. Louis. Olivia had expanded her sewing business to include a small shop in town, run by Clara, who had become like a daughter to her. The shop sold ready-made clothing as well as custom orders, and it was doing well enough that Olivia was considering opening a second location. Emma, now in her late teens, had attracted the attention of several young men in Independence, but she was in no hurry to marry. She had her father's independent streak and her mother's practical nature, and she declared that she would not settle for anything less than a love like her parents had. Olivia and Andrew could hardly argue with that. Oliver, meanwhile, was proving himself to be a natural leader. At 16, he was already managing much of the day-to-day work on the ranch, and the hired hands respected him despite his youth. He had dreams of expanding the cattle operation, and Andrew was seriously considering it. The ranch had the land and the resources, and Oliver had the drive and the vision to make it work. The twins, now 8 years old, were a study in contrasts. Adam was quiet and thoughtful, always with his nose in a book when he was not doing his chores. Opal was wild and energetic, constantly getting into scrapes and adventures that gave Olivia gray hairs. But they were both loving and good-hearted, and Olivia could not imagine life without them. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Emma had made a beautiful cake, Oliver had organized a dance in the barn, and the twins had picked wildflowers to decorate the house. Friends and neighbors came from all over to join in the festivities, and it was a joyous occasion. Andrew gave a speech that had everyone laughing and crying in equal measure. He talked about the early days of their marriage, about the struggles and the triumphs, about watching their family grow and their dreams come true. And then he looked at Olivia with such love in his eyes that she felt like she was the only person in the room. 20 years ago, I married the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I had ever met, he said. And every single day since then, she has proven me right. Olivia, you are my heart, my home, my everything. I love you more today than I did when we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Thank you for saying yes to a cowboy with nothing but a promise. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for our children and our home and every single moment we have shared. You are my greatest blessing, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. Olivia was crying openly by the time he finished, and so were half the people in the barn. She stood and went to him, and he pulled her into his arms and kissed her to enthusiastic applause from their guests. I love you, she whispered against his lips. Forever and always. Forever and always, he echoed. The party went on late into the night, with music and dancing and laughter. Olivia danced with Andrew, with her sons, with neighbors and friends. She watched Emma flirt harmlessly with a young man from town, and made a mental note to ask about him later. She watched Oliver demonstrate a rope trick to an admiring crowd and felt pride swell in her chest. She watched the twins chase each other around the barn in some complicated game, only they understood and smiled at their energy. This was her life. This was what she and Andrew had built together from the ashes of the worst day of her life. And it was more than she had ever dreamed possible. As the years rolled on, changes came as they always did. Emma eventually did marry, to a banker's son from Kansas City who had come to independence on business and fallen for her at first sight. The wedding was beautiful, and Olivia cried happy tears as she watched her daughter walk down the aisle. Emma and her husband settled in Kansas City, and she had 3 children in quick succession, making Olivia and Andrew grandparents. Oliver married as well to the daughter of a neighboring rancher. It was a practical match in some ways. Combining the 2 properties made both ranches stronger, but it was also a love match. Oliver adored his wife, Sarah, and they worked side by side to build the cattle operation he had dreamed of. They had 2 sons who showed every sign of growing up to be ranchers like their father. The twins went in different directions. Adam surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, taking a position at the school in Independence, and showing a real gift for working with children. Opal, true to her wild nature, married a traveling photographer and went off to see the world with him, sending letters from exotic locations that the family read aloud around the dinner table. As Andrew and Olivia entered their 50s, they began to step back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch and the sewing business, trusting their children and their capable employees to handle things. They had earned their rest, and they took pleasure in spending time with their grandchildren and each other. One summer evening in 1903, 30 years after they had first met, Andrew and Olivia sat on the porch of their house as they had so many times before. They were older now, with gray hair and lines on their faces, but they still held hands like newlyweds. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Olivia asked. "When you found me in the dirt." "I said a lot of things," Andrew said with a smile, "but I think I know which words you mean. Nobody touches you again." "You kept that promise," Olivia said. "Not just physically, but emotionally too. You protected my heart as fiercely as you protected my body. You made me feel safe in ways I had not even known I needed to be safe." Andrew brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "You made me understand what it meant to truly love someone. Before you, I was just drifting, working and saving, but without any real purpose. You gave me a purpose. You gave me a reason to build something lasting." "We gave each other that," Olivia said. "That is what makes what we have so special. It is not one-sided. We are partners in the truest sense of the word." "Partners," Andrew agreed, "and lovers and best friends. You are everything to me, Olivia. You always have been and you always will be." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to tame and cultivate. The ranch was thriving under Oliver's management, better than it had ever been. Emma's sewing shop had expanded to 3 locations and was making more money than Olivia had ever imagined possible. Adam was beloved by his students and respected in the community. And Opal Wilde, free Opal, was living the adventure she had always craved. "We did good, did we not?" Andrew said quietly. "We did better than good," Olivia said. "We built something beautiful. A family, a legacy, a love that will last beyond our lifetimes. Our children and our grandchildren will carry what we taught them forward, and they will teach their children, and on and on. That is immortality, Andrew. That is what really matters." Andrew pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, perfectly content. They had been through so much together: hardship and heartbreak, triumph and joy. They had faced down dangers and overcome obstacles. They had raised children and built businesses, and created a life that was rich in every way that mattered. And it had all started in a dusty alley in Independence, Missouri, with a young woman bleeding in the dirt and a cowboy who refused to let her suffer alone. From that moment of darkness and violence had come light and love, and a lifetime of happiness. It was proof, Olivia thought, that even the worst circumstances could lead to the best outcomes if you were brave enough to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep believing. "I love you," she said, the words as true and necessary as breathing. "I love you too," Andrew said, "always and forever." And there, on the porch of the house they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had created, Andrew and Olivia Newman held each other close and watched the stars come out, grateful for every moment they had been given and every moment still to come. The years that followed were gentler, filled with the quiet joys of watching their family continue to grow and flourish. Emma's children grew up and started families of their own, and Oliver's sons became strong young men who were already showing signs of being even better ranchers than their father. Adam married late, to a widow with 2 children of her own, and he embraced fatherhood with the same gentle dedication he brought to teaching. Opal and her husband eventually settled down in Colorado, where they opened a photography studio that became quite successful. Andrew and Olivia celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary with a gathering even bigger than their 20th. All 5 of their children came home for the occasion, along with grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The house and barn overflowed with family, and the sound of laughter and conversation filled the air. Emma, now a handsome woman in her late 30s, gave a toast that had everyone reaching for handkerchiefs. "My parents taught me what love looks like," she said. "Not just through their words, but through their actions every single day. They showed me that love is not just a feeling, it is a choice you make over and over again to stand by someone, to support them, to build a life together. They showed me that love can start in the darkest moments and grow into something that lights up the world. I am who I am because of them, and my children are who they are because of the legacy my parents created. I am so grateful to have them as my example and my foundation." Oliver spoke next, his voice gruff with emotion. "Dad, you taught me what it means to be a man. Not through lectures or rules, but by showing me every day how to work hard, how to treat people with respect, how to love your wife and children with everything you have. Mom, you taught me that strength comes in many forms, that courage is not the absence of fear but the decision to keep going despite it. You both gave me roots and wings, and I hope I have made you proud." Adam, ever the wordsmith, gave a beautiful speech about the power of love to transform and heal. And Opal, true to form, made everyone laugh and cry with her colorful recounting of growing up on the ranch, and the many ways her parents had supported her, even when her dreams took her far from home. By the time all the children had spoken, Olivia was openly weeping, and Andrew was not far behind. When it was their turn to speak, they stood together, arms around each other, and thanked their children for the lives they had built and the family they had created. "We are so proud of all of you," Olivia said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You have become such wonderful people, and you have given us grandchildren and great-grandchildren who fill our hearts with joy. Your father and I started with nothing but love and a dream, and you are the proof that those things can be enough. You are our greatest accomplishment, and we love you all so much." Andrew, struggling to speak through the lump in his throat, managed to add, "Your mother is the strongest person I have ever known. She took the worst thing that ever happened to her and refused to let it define her or destroy her. Instead, she built a life of such beauty and purpose that it takes my breath away. And she did it with grace and dignity and a capacity for love that amazes me every single day. I am the luckiest man alive to have been her partner in all of this." The party went on late into the night, with music and dancing and stories shared across generations. Children chased each other around the yard while the adults talked and laughed and reminisced. It was exactly the kind of celebration a life well lived deserved. As Olivia and Andrew finally made their way to bed in the early hours of the morning, both exhausted but happy, Olivia turned to her husband and said, "I cannot believe it has been 40 years. "I can," Andrew said. "Every moment with you has felt like a gift. Even the hard times, we faced them together, and that made all the difference." "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you had not been there that day?" Olivia asked. "If you had not found me?" Andrew was quiet for a moment, considering. "I try not to," he admitted. "The thought of you suffering, of you not surviving, of never getting to know you and love you and build this life with you, it is too painful to contemplate. I am just grateful that I was there, that I was given the chance to be part of your life." "You are not just part of my life," Olivia said fiercely. "You are my life. You and our children and everything we have built together. I was lost before I met you, Andrew. I did not even know how lost I was until you found me and showed me what it meant to be truly seen and truly loved." Andrew pulled her close and she snuggled into his familiar warmth. "We found each other," he said. "That is what matters, and we made something beautiful from it." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the evidence of a love that had endured and thrived for 4 decades. The final years of their lives were peaceful. They watched with pride as their descendants continued to build on the foundation they had laid. The Newman name became synonymous with quality horses and successful ranching throughout Missouri and beyond. Emma's sewing business continued to thrive, eventually being passed down to one of her daughters who had inherited Olivia's talent. Adam became the principal of the independent school, respected and loved by generations of students. Opal's photography studio won awards, and her images were displayed in galleries across the country. And Oliver built the Newman Ranch into one of the most successful operations in the region, fulfilling the dreams his parents had cherished. Andrew passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1911, at the age of 61. He had been in declining health for some time, and while his death was not a shock, it left a hole in Olivia's heart that nothing could fill. She held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering her love and her gratitude for the life they had shared. The funeral was attended by what seemed like everyone in Independence and the surrounding area. People came to pay their respects to the man who had been known for his integrity, his kindness, and his unwavering devotion to his family. The stories shared that day painted a picture of a life well lived and a man who had made a real difference in the world. Olivia grieved deeply, but she did not break. She had Andrew's strength living on in her, and she had their children and grandchildren who needed her. She continued to live in the house they had built together, surrounded by memories and love. Her children visited often, and she was never alone unless she chose to be. In her final years, Olivia often sat on the porch where she and Andrew had spent so many evenings, watching the sun set over the ranch. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a terrified young woman bleeding in the dirt to a matriarch surrounded by a loving family. She thought about Andrew's promise, "Nobody touches you again," and how he had kept it in every way that mattered. She thought about love, real and lasting love, and how it had the power to transform even the darkest moments into something beautiful. She thought about resilience and courage, about choosing to keep going even when the path ahead seemed impossible. And she thought about legacy, about the lives she and Andrew had touched, and the family they had created that would carry on long after they were gone. Olivia passed away in her sleep in the spring of 1915 at the age of 62. She was buried beside Andrew in the Independence Cemetery under a headstone that read, "Olivia and Andrew Newman, beloved parents and grandparents, together in life, together in death, together forever." At her funeral, Emma stood and shared the story of how her parents met, the story that had become legend in the family. She told about the attack, about Andrew finding Olivia and making his promise, about the love that had grown from that moment of crisis. She told about the life they had built together, about the ranch and the family and the legacy they had left behind. "My parents taught us that love is not just about the good times," Emma said, her voice strong despite her tears. "It is about choosing each other every single day, in good times and bad, in sickness and health, in joy and in sorrow. They showed us that love can heal the deepest wounds, and that with the right partner, you can build something that lasts beyond your lifetime." Their love story is our family's foundation, and it will continue to inspire generations to come. Oliver added, "Dad kept his promise to Mom for almost 40 years. He protected her, loved her, and stood by her through everything. And Mom, in turn, gave Dad a life of such richness and meaning that he often said he was the luckiest man alive. They were partners in the truest sense, and what they built together, this family, this ranch, this legacy, is proof that love really can conquer all." The years passed, and the Newman family continued to grow and flourish. The ranch prospered under Oliver's sons, and then their sons after them. Emma's sewing business evolved with the times, eventually becoming a successful chain of clothing stores across Missouri. Adams' influence on education and independence was so significant that they named a school after him. And Opal's photographs became valuable works of art, collected and displayed in museums. But more important than any material success was the family itself. The Newmans became known for their closeness, their loyalty to one another, and their willingness to help those in need. They held regular reunions where all branches of the family would gather to celebrate and remember their roots. And every gathering included the retelling of Andrew and Olivia's love story, a reminder of where they had come from and the values that defined them. The great-great-grandchildren grew up hearing about the cowboy who had lifted a young woman out of the dirt and promised that nobody would touch her again, and about the seamstress who had refused to let her trauma define her and had instead built a life of such beauty and purpose that it inspired everyone who knew her. They learned that love was not always easy, but it was always worth fighting for. They learned that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was to trust again after being hurt. They learned that family was not just about blood, it was about the bonds you chose to create and maintain. And so the story of Andrew and Olivia Newman lived on, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of love to transform and heal and create something lasting and beautiful. Their names were spoken with reverence and affection, and their example continued to guide their descendants long after they were gone. The ranch they had built together still stood, modernized and expanded, but recognizably the same place they had carved out of the prairie with their own hands. The house they had raised their children in became a family museum of sorts, preserved and maintained by their descendants as a reminder of their heritage. And the town of Independence, Missouri, which had witnessed the beginning of their love story, remembered them as pillars of the community who had made a real and lasting difference. In the end, Andrew and Olivia's story was not just about survival or even about love, though those were certainly central themes. It was about the choice to keep going when giving up would have been easier. It was about finding strength in partnership and purpose in family. It was about building something meaningful from the pieces of a broken past. And it was about the simple, profound truth that sometimes, in our darkest moments, we find exactly what we need if we are brave enough to reach for it. The cowboy who had promised that nobody would touch her again had kept his word. And the woman he had lifted from the dirt had proven that with love, courage, and determination, anything was possible. Together, they had created a legacy that would endure for generations, a reminder that even from the worst circumstances, the most beautiful things can grow. Their story ended not with their deaths, but with the continuing life and love of their family, with the ranch that still bore their name, with the values they had instilled that still guided their descendants. Andrew and Olivia Newman had started with nothing but a promise and a dream, and they had turned it into something extraordinary. And that, in the end, was the greatest love story of all.